You've probably done it more than once. Stayed longer than you should have. Watched the signs pile up. Felt your friends gently pull away because they couldn't watch anymore. And the strangest part? You knew. You've always known. But knowing didn't change anything. Most people assume this is about denial, or low self-esteem, or not loving yourself enough. They think if you just saw your worth, you'd leave. But that's not quite it. Because some of the smartest, most self-aware people stay in relationships that hurt them. People who succeed in every other area of life. People who can see the problem clearly and still can't move. So what's actually happening? Why do some people stay in love that's wrong for them, even when they know better? There's a specific psychological profile here, and it's not what most people think. Let's start with what researchers call intermittent reinforcement. It's one of the most powerful conditioning mechanisms in behavioral psychology. When a reward comes unpredictably, when affection or kindness arrives at random intervals mixed with withdrawal or pain, the brain doesn't adapt normally. It gets trained not to expect consistency, but to chase it. Slot machines work this way. You don't win every time, but the occasional win keeps you playing longer than a predictable pattern ever would. In relationships, this looks like someone who's cold for days, then suddenly warm, distant, then intensely present. The unpredictability doesn't push you away. It pulls you in deeper. Your brain starts working overtime, trying to figure out what you did right when things were good, what you can do to get back there. And here's the critical part. This isn't happening because you're weak. It's happening because your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It's trying to solve a pattern, trying to restore safety. For many people who stay too long, there's something deeper beneath the surface. A very specific kind of early programming. If your childhood involved earning love, if affection was conditional or inconsistent, if you learned that closeness required constant vigilance, then your nervous system built itself around that. It didn't learn that love is steady. It learned that love is something you work for, something you prove you deserve. So when you meet someone whose love feels hard to hold, your system doesn't register that as a warning. It registers it as familiar. And familiarity to the nervous system often feels like home, even when home wasn't safe. This is not about wanting to suffer. It's about what your brain recognizes as normal. There's another layer here that often goes unnoticed. Researchers studying attachment have found that people who stay in mismatched relationships often have what's called a high tolerance for emotional ambiguity. They can sit in uncertainty longer than most. They can hold contradictions. Someone can be cruel and kind, and they won't collapse those two things into one judgment. They'll see both. They'll believe both are real. In some contexts, this is a profound strength. It makes you patient, empathetic, willing to see people's potential, not just their actions. But in love, it becomes a trap, because you keep seeing who someone could be, might be, if only the circumstances were different. If only you tried harder. If only they healed. And the relationship starts to feel like a project, something you're building together, even if you're the only one building. Here's where it gets complicated, because staying isn't always passive. Sometimes it's an active choice rooted in a very particular belief system. Some people stay because they fundamentally believe that love is supposed to be hard, that anything worth having requires struggle, that ease means shallowness. This belief often comes from watching love modeled as sacrifice. Parents who stayed through difficulty and framed it as virtue. Cultural or religious messaging that equated commitment with endurance, no matter the cost. If that's your blueprint, then a relationship that feels easy might actually feel suspicious. Like it's not real love if it doesn't hurt a little. The brain doesn't distinguish between meaningful difficulty and unnecessary pain. It just knows effort. And if effort has always been tied to value, then suffering starts to feel like proof you care. Now let's talk about identity. Because for some people, the relationship becomes woven into who they are. Not just what they do, but how they see themselves. The person who stays. The person who doesn't give up. The person who loves harder than anyone else. There's a quiet pride in that, a sense of moral weight. And walking away would mean losing not just the relationship, but that identity. That story you've been telling yourself about who you are. Psychologists call this identity foreclosure. When your sense of self gets locked into a role so tightly that changing the role feels like losing yourself. And that loss, that existential fear, can feel bigger than the pain of staying. There's also something happening neurologically that most people don't talk about. When you've been with someone for a long time, even in dysfunction, your brain builds thousands of micro-associations. A song, a time of day, the way light comes through a window, your neural pathways get encoded with that person. So leaving doesn't just mean losing them. It means losing entire landscapes of memory and meaning. Pieces of yourself that only exist in proximity to them. Grief researchers have found that ambiguous loss, losing someone who's still alive, is one of the hardest forms of loss to process. Because there's no closure, no clear end. And when you're the one choosing to leave, you carry the weight of that decision alone. It's not something that happened to you. It's something you did. And that agency makes the grief more complicated, more lonely. So some people stay because leaving feels like an act of violence. Against the other person, against their own memories, against the version of themselves that still believes this could work. And here's the paradox. Staying often isn't about hope. It's about fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of starting over. Fear of being wrong about love entirely. Because if this doesn't work and you gave it everything, what does that mean about your judgment? Your instincts? Your capacity to be loved the way you need? Sometimes staying is the safer gamble. Because at least you know this pain. You've survived it before. The pain of leaving is uncharted. None of this makes staying the wrong choice. And leaving isn't always the right one. Because people are different. Timelines are different. What looks like staying too long from the outside might be someone's necessary process. Some people need to stay until they've exhausted every possibility, until they know with absolute certainty they did everything they could. That's not weakness. That's completion. But if you're someone who stays, it's worth asking yourself one question. Not whether you should leave, but whether you're staying because you're building something real or because you try to prove something. To them, to yourself, to the version of you that learned love was supposed to feel like this. You're not broken for staying. You're not foolish. You're wired for loyalty, for depth, for seeing people beyond their worst moments. Those are rare qualities. But they become costly when they're aimed at someone who isn't meeting you there. When your capacity to stay becomes the only thing holding the relationship together. If this felt familiar, there's more to understand about the way you move through connection, about what you're actually protecting when you hold on, and what might be waiting on the other side of letting go.